Hi everybody, Tony Davitt. I'm head of technical strategy in Cisco. That basically means I head up a bunch of pre-sales engineers across Ireland and Scotland that are focused on a multitude of technologies, security being in there. I've been with Cisco for coming up on 20 years. Before I took over the team, I was a member of the team looking after security for about 8 of those years. My background, I'm a CCIE, 24 years. Jesus, I sound old, sorry. But I'm also here in the guise of sitting on the steering committee for Technology Ireland ICT SkillNet, who, shameless plug, have a stand just out the door to your left there. I see Susan in the audience. She'll be more than happy to talk to you about what they do. But essentially, the organisation is to help individuals and organisations find critical skills that are needed in the industry today. So please do talk to them. Obviously I'm coming at it probably more from a technology perspective, but at the same time, Cisco has been building up what we would call a platform for security, and that encompasses both technology, process, and people as well.
Thank you. Carmel.
Good afternoon. I'm Carmel Summers, and I started my career with IBM. And while I was there, I also sat on the steering group for Technology Ireland ICT SkillNet. So that was my entry into cybersecurity, as I worked with ICT SkillNet on the very first masters that they produced around cybersecurity. And at the time, that was a requirement that IBM had to, I suppose, to grow the skills at a higher level within the organisation. Since then, I'm a chartered working organisational psychologist, and I now work with companies who are trying to embed resilience and to prepare their teams and make sure that they're ready for an incident if an incident should happen. So that's why I'm here, I guess, today.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you. Okay. Likewise, I'm with IBM. I'm still with IBM. But IBM, my history with IBM, they didn't like me much because I used to run worldwide emergency management. What does that mean? Anytime human nature and mother nature takes the crap out of your country, then you need to bring an emergency management team in. So IBM used to send me into Fukushima in Japan after nuclear disaster, the mudslide in Rio de Janeiro, the Orlando incident in the Philippines, Sandy in New York, to figure out what you didn't do a good job here, and how do we build emergency management response systems? Because you don't get a do-over when you're facing, large man-made or Mother Nature disasters. There's lives at stake, and that really, really focused my energy on what exactly is a good response, an adequate response, when the results that you're playing with can be disastrous to your country. But now I'm in cyber. Is that the results that you're playing with could be disastrous to your company. So when I usually sit down with cyber teams and cyber folks, I always ask them, what do they think the most important product is? And they'll say EDR. And I'll say EDR is important. Without a doubt, you have to start it, endpoint detection. And next one is SIM. Yeah, SIM is really important because you're going to need what's going on. But I said the next one, which is probably the most important product, which is a process in my eyes, is the SOAR. Is the security orchestration automated response. In other words, when the bad guys hit you at 2 in the morning on a Saturday, on an Easter weekend, your response is as good as any response that is on a Tuesday morning. But your L1s are in situ, while your L2s and 3s might not. How do you make sure everything gets done? So that's what it really focused on a lot, because now it's products can only do what the process can demand.
Okay.
Good experience in that.
Okay, well, coming at it from the slightly technical side first, over the last number of years, cybersecurity has evolved very much from ditches and walls to protecting data at rest, in motion, wherever it is, evolving away from those kind of firewalls and things like that. But it has also evolved to the attitude of something will happen, it is inevitable, so you have to be able to react to it. From the human side, has the same level of progress been made, or are there gaps there? So maybe, Jackie, if you want to start with that.
I suppose we're all aware probably the majority of cyber attacks are human caused by human. ones that I would know about anyway are usually called by a human. So the new regulations that are coming in, DORA, which is already in, and NIS2, a key component of those is your obligation to train your staff about cyber awareness and try and protect your organisation there. Like if you don't be able to provide that resilience for them and proper incident response, then you are going to be fined. And if there's critical data and critical loss.
And Carl, coming in on that as well, the sort of personal impact for somebody if they are involved in that front line, say a phishing attack or something like that. Even the most technically adept of us sometimes just had a bad day or distracted with 4 different things, and you respond to something you shouldn't. How, from the sort of psychological point of view, first of all, then into the procedural, how do you start talking about resilience in that context?
Yeah, so I suppose the first thing is psychological safety. So if you don't have a culture in your organization where people feel safe to raise their hand and say, I think I might have done something, or I spotted something and it doesn't look right. So if they have a fear that there will be a negative impact on them saying something or owning up to doing something that may cause an incident, then you've sort of lost the battle, to be honest. Because at the end of the day, it's everybody's responsibility in the organization to make sure that we don't have a cyber attack. And if we do have a cyber attack, because everybody's going to get caught in some. I think it's a myth to think that a business won't. So it is really important that people understand their role and that they also understand what to do when that incident happens. And that's another piece of it that we're not seeing happening. And it kind of goes back to culture. And if we just even take the recent Marks and Spencer's one, the incident that happened there a few weeks ago, I think Paul mentioned it in his opening session this morning, and they've lost a huge amount of money. But aside from that, they had people who were completely stressed out. They had to go back to manual processes. And, when you hear that, you're thinking, would I know how to do a manual process for my job since I've probably been using technology for it for so long? So I think there's a huge amount of things that we have to do, but the foundation is to make sure that people feel comfortable to be able to raise their hand, to ask a question, to say, oh, I might have done something. That's key.
Okay.
I might just jump in there with a couple of thoughts.
Yeah.
I genuinely feel really sorry for anybody that works in SecOps, because the way I think of them is like a referee in a football game. When they do really, really well, they never get a mention, but it's only when something goes wrong that they're actually picked on, I feel like, at that point in time. So it's kind of a really hard position to be in, and that's the way I think of them. Also, I think in today's world, and we've been going 13 minutes and going to mention AI. I thought it would happen quicker than that. But in a world where attackers are starting to use AI for attacks, of all sorts of attacks, and trying to keep up with the level of attacks that are happening, even forgetting AI, which has accelerated it, humans just can't keep up with that level of information, attacks, alerts, and so forth. So we need, as an industry, to make systems easier to use. That's on manufacturers like Cisco, to be fair, and I don't think we and all the other vendors have done a good enough a job on that. But at the same time, we also need to start embracing automation and AI in defence systems as well, which I think has been much slower adoption than it should be.
Indeed. Well, Michael, maybe coming to you then, in terms of an organisation assessing its own level of cyber resilience, because it's possibly going to be different depending on the nature of your organisation, whether you're heavily regulated or not, but what are the kind of broad strokes there in terms of assessing your own cyber resilience capacity, and where then do people fit within that?
So when you mention the word resilience, the definition is the ability to recover from an incident. So your COO, he or she, really won't care if somebody drove a forklift through the server, if a sprinkler system took out your server room, or somebody ransomwared your box. They cannot deliver the features. Just like the HSE in May 2021, when they got taken out, they went back to spreadsheets and flipboards. So they had to become resilient very fast.
wasn't easy and they didn't do a good job, but they weren't expected to do a good job because nobody thought it was going to happen. But what you have to look then is you have to say, well, resiliency is the ability to recover from an operational knock. So now you have to go through each of your steps to say, well, what is a mission critical operation? What is important and what can be sacrificed, for the want of a better word. Because you can't cover everything at all levels. So you start to say, well, okay, then you have to look at, to say, well, what is my sensitive, non-sensitive areas? How have I taught my technology? How have I evolved my technology against this AI attack, against what's going to come in the next few years, which is going to be quantum safe? But also, how well can my people respond as well? So, as I said with the SOAR is a process, but it's only as good as the people who run the process. So how well do I train my process of people and interconnect with technology? And I'm a big fan of not letting level threes, if any of you run SOCs, level threes design your process. Worst thing in the world. Because they will decide that this is this step and this is the next step. And all their institutional memory that goes between those two steps are in their head. But if I'm a brand new guy in your business, I will have not known what that institutional memory is. And when I read the responding workflow, I'll go, I have no idea how I've gone from step 1 to step 2. And that's people. No matter how much great technology you had, you've missed the point. So what you got to take a look at, and if I've always said to my SOC folks that the best people then to train for this resiliency and for training for this war game, because you got to play the war games in response, is get a lean Six Sigma. And he or she will know nothing about cyber, but I don't care. But they will know that, which Carmel will probably point out, they will know that that incremental step from step 1 to step 2 is unattainable by an ordinary person because you've missed some significant steps. But the lean expert will look at that and go, okay, what are we trying to do? How are we accomplish? So I've always said I would never let a level 3 or level 2 in a SOC design a workflow. I would always bring in lean because it's, as Carmen pointed out, it's the human aspect of what do they have to do. So from the resiliency is identify what is critical, identify who is critical, and try to make sure that the institutional memory is divided among many people and then tested.
Indeed. That brings up an important point, which is one of the questions later on, but maybe it's worth exploring now, is making sure that people are bought into the concept of cyber resilience. So we all hear about buy-in from the top down to sponsor the initiatives necessary to get things going. But how important is it, and how do you go about making sure that everybody, I heard the term recently from janitor to general, so everybody in the organization understands where their function fits within the effective resilience of the organization. So maybe, Jackie, if you want to start with that.
I suppose back to Carmen's point, it's back to the culture of your organisation. Each person needs to feel important to what they're doing, and that will really help you then get them to buy into when something goes wrong. Probably your frontline staff, if we take Marks and Spencer's, or if you're in any retail outlet, when the tills go down, they're the people who you really realise how important they are, the people on the checkouts, because they now can't do anything when their systems are down, and you're forced with trying to, they're forced to try and work around it and deal with bad customers, whereas the management probably are up in the office trying to get things working. But it's to build in a culture where in your organisation people understand their importance to the role and the importance of the role they play to your organisation. And I suppose educating your management so that they can do that and include people. If I suppose if you're a startup and you're going to go off and look for funding, you have to produce a business continuity plan. The bigger you get, then the less, I think the further away you are from that plan, whereas it needs to now be embedded in every organisation, that you have a business continuity plan and what roles are important within that, to be able to really embed resilience into your organisation.
Well, Carmel, maybe then what are the kind of key aspects then of developing that kind of culture, to that culture that has everybody understanding their contribution to the overall effect, that that culture tends to come from the top. So what's necessary to begin to instill that kind of culture and develop it as it needs to go as well?
Yeah, so I suppose the first thing is how we communicate. So if we think about any organization, you have different levels of digitalization in the organization. So when you go to communicate people's responsibilities, they need to understand, how cybersecurity affects their role or how it sits within their role. And you really do have to build that culture that says, it's everybody's job to sort of protect our systems, to raise your hand if you see anything odd. And then I think the other piece is that we need to join the dots. So even though it's everybody's responsibility, if I sit in HR, I have a role to play should we have an incident. So does operations, so does tech, so does legal. So we need to prepare people from a training point of view where they actually know what happens and what should happen when something occurs. So it shouldn't be that we're all sort of running around like headless chickens on the day something happens and we don't even know who we should be connecting with in those different departments. So training has to happen at a level that makes sense for, as you said, from the janitor right up to the general. And I think then you have to also train your leaders to lead through that. So they can't disappear to a cave. They should be the most visible person in the building, the leadership team, when something happens. And I suppose the other side of that is also that the first and most important thing is not the business, it's actually the people. Because if you bring them on that journey, if you ignore them, if you're not engaging with them as you go through this process, then you know what I mean, you kind of have a disconnected, people don't know where they fit in the process and they're kind of left aside. So it's people first, it's business next.
I think also just on that point though is education is absolutely what people need to do and awareness. But I think sometimes I've certainly worked in organizations where, they say, okay, we have to put a program in place or a strategy and it gets written down and said, that's what we're going to do. And then put it in an envelope in a drawer and never looked at again. So education needs to be continuous, repeated. It becomes part of the overall business as opposed just to be a tick box exercise that we need to do once off. It has to be continuous.
Yeah.
And how practically is that achieved? Like, is the kind of gaming scenario as important on the sales floor as it is on in the technical rooms?
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the things we do in Cisco all the time is, it's a really simple thing. I'm sure other organizations do it too. Quite regularly, I get a phishing email that's sent out by Cisco IT, right? Yes, I have clicked on it sometimes, but anyway. And then you get pointed at a training link, right? But that again is just instilling the culture, awareness on a continuous basis that this is something that you need to be aware of. It can easily happen. You can quite easily get caught out by it too. And then if you do, then here's some training that you should look at basically and so on. So absolutely, it's just as important. Yeah.
Very good, Michael.
So there is, you pointed out there, good communication. I love going through Heathrow Airport because if you ever walk through Heathrow Airport, you'll see your flight information like on screens up here. But every 3 or 4 minutes, they show KPIs. They will show what is the waiting time, cleanliness of the toilets, availability of seating down, and some of them are red, but they're prepared to show that this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. Because it's an enforcer to the people who work in the airport that, we're not scared to show that we're doing good or we're doing bad. And it's an enforcer to show the other stakeholders. Likewise, when I work with organizations, say, you should put that up, like you had the phishing, to say, the IT team said that there was 4,000 phishing attempts last month, 6 got through. Only one of them has to be successful, and we're dead. But you share that with people to say that, guys, it's not the IT team's job to stop the 4,000. It was this 5 people who clicked on it, let through. So you should build KPIs that aren't KPIs that, if I can't change a KPI, don't show it to me. It's a simple rule of KPIs. But if I know I can change that to say, well, we were attacked by 4,000 and 6 got through. I don't want to be part of those 6 that clicked on the button. You share that with your team, and you say, guys, it's this is what happened. We got a malware attack here. We got a denial of service. We got a man in the middle. Somebody left the computer open. A key was found in the car park. But you put them into KPIs and say, guys, this is all our responsibility, and we're going to show both the reds, and when they go to greens, fantastic. So
Yeah.
it really is, as you said, communication, but communication that people say, I can see my effort changes that KPI.
Okay. Well, we've mentioned Marks and Spencers this morning, and not to bash them in any way. Organizations all have their own different vulnerabilities, but are there particular sectors, verticals, or industries that are good, and are there ones that aren't in terms of cyber resilience? Does anybody have any examples or commentary?
Yeah, I can take that one as a start. So I don't know whether you're aware, but Cisco have a threat intelligence operation. Basically, it's called Talos Intelligence. I'd strongly encourage you to seek it out on the web. Huge amount of good information. But they've just actually released a year in review report for 2024. Excuse me. And it looks at all the different top attacks that are happening and so forth. And actually, as a vertical, ransomware is called out every single year, where ransomware has kind of changed fundamentally, as opposed to just, the email and, you could give us 0.2 of a Bitcoin or whatever the figure is these days, to being actually attacking and disabling organizations. And we clearly saw that with the HSE a couple of years ago and so forth. But actually, education, and particularly higher education, is being targeted much more than any other vertical at the moment for some reason. Some of the reasons are called out in the report, such as lack of investment in the actual universities or colleges. What was some of the other ones? Sorry, lost my train of thought there. Lack of monitoring and lack of segmentation in those networks, but also the fact that there's actually a huge amount of information that they want to get out that could be held in the research organizations and so forth. So, education is one of the ones that's been really, really targeted. We need more investment in education, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, Michael, from your view, are there particularly good areas or particularly bad areas?
Sorry, in relation to?
In relation to cyber resilience generally.
So many different industries do so many different things. From good, no, it really is not focusing on a single part of your resiliency. It is a defense in depth. It is about protecting your endpoints, your networks, which is your network security, moving into your database security, which is looking at access to the database. And a significant amount of databases are lost by ransomware. In fact, the M&S was lost by ransomware through an account takeover of a DBA. And that DBA, he or she, it was a malicious attack through them, but it wasn't focusing. They didn't focus on their job to keep themselves safe. They somehow let themselves be compromised. So it's not even the guys down using a laptop. It can be the guys who have the keys to the kingdom. So I can't say if there's any one point I point out, but you just have to make sure you have as much defense in depth as possible, because how did then person get to a DBA? Because they would have had to overstep other things. So sometimes we over-rotate on a single topic or a single item, and we think, well, we're safe because we've encrypted all our data, or we're safe because we have a great XDR. So it really is making sure everything is looked at.
I think the finance sector is actually probably one of the ones that are a little bit ahead maybe of other verticals as well in terms of cyber resilience. And I say that because literally for the first time I actually heard that somebody had appointed a cyber resilience manager as a title role in a financial organization there recently. So I think they're maybe a little bit ahead of the game.
Interesting. I hadn't actually heard of a title role in the sector yet. Jack?
I suppose I can definitely agree with that with the financial services sector. I suppose DORA did come in sooner than NIST too. But I worked as a developer in many organizations, and in the financial services sector, the stringency was much better across everything that we did, because of the fact that you can lose real money. It's quite obvious to people the risk that is in a financial organization, whereas you're working with, say, in education, and MTU was actually a victim of a cyber attack. You can't see the monetary loss that's there, or the loss that's there, but there is one. We were actually, the amount that it has cost, that cyber attack has cost us, was out in the public domain last week. It's in the millions, and that's public money. These are public organizations. And because of the fact that there is no investment, and the same applies to the HSE, in things that are actually key to how you operate. But it's public money, and there has to be a balance between paying people to provide the service and realizing that your IT system is just as important. Because if you've been in a hospital at any time when an IT system goes down, you see the catastrophic implications of it, to the staff and then to all the patients. And the same, well, luckily for higher education, teaching can continue without the IT system. Nothing else can, but teaching can. And that's our core business.
Indeed, and even with the push to try and get to electronic health records, the implication of an outage would be even greater. But again, just putting numbers on them, and not to bash Marks and Spencer's, they have been extremely good in terms of putting out information. I believe the figure they have put on it is £331 million it has cost them already. And that's mostly in missed online sales, because they've just not been able to get their online sales capability back to an acceptable standard. So it's very real. It's genuine impact. I heard one commentary yesterday that it may represent up to half of their profitability for the current year. So it's very, very significant. But maybe, Michael, coming back to you on to kind of flip the previous question a little bit, are there common gaps that you find when organizations begin to look at resilience as a holistic concept? Are there common sort of mistakes or gaps that are found when they start to do that assessment?
So I think we answered that actually nearly every time. And what I mean by the answer was, it seems that the responsibility falls in the IT and the security teams, that they are the people who have to keep us safe. And yes, they are tasked with the implementation of the solutions, but they're not the people who keep us safe. We're all the people who keep us safe. And that's still the gap. This thing about, it was because the IT team didn't put up a firewall, or it was because the IT team did this, or the IT team couldn't stop the malware moving through. Well, it had to come through at a point. So we still, I think, over-rely on our security and IT teams, which means we got to share the responsibility. Still hasn't been achieved yet.
Okay.
I think that's probably one of the areas that needs a lot of work to be done. And the Japanese, and I love to use metaphors, the Japanese did it. They used to call it quality control, meaning there was a problem. It was never a problem with quality. It was a problem with the ability to build parts. And then they moved to quality management. But then they moved to quality assurance, meaning that quality is an inbuilt item to the organization, and we're just going to ensure that that happens. And maybe what you could be talking about is resilient assurance. It's an inbuilt quality or attribute into the organization. Now, the Japanese took a good few years to do this, and then they were able to build that into the way of operating. It would be nice to start moving into that direction, that cyber assurance, that it's just an inbuilt attribute to us all. We're still a long way away.
That's a very good point, and something I'll come to you, Carmel, on in a minute, because the blameless culture in particular, in making sure that people are they're assured to come forward to things, that was something that took the aviation industry a very long time to institute, because they had what they called tombstone technology. People died, and then they figured out what the problem was. So it took them a long time, but they had that since the 60s. So why is it taken tech so long to learn from established principles already and to institute those in? Because even there's another example in terms of in crime investigation, where the concept of victim blaming meant that investigations often started on the wrong foot completely. So there seem to be parallels in other industries. How is it taking so long to bring those threads together?
I sort of wonder, is it the reliance on tech, that we think if we've bought the right technologies, bought the right tools, put them in, or we've got our team of people in place, and we forget that that most attacks happen because it's somebody not in the tech team that does something, and maybe the tech team get blamed for it, because if it hadn't come through, I wouldn't have clicked it. But effectively, we have instances with MGM Resorts in 2023. It was a phone call. Somebody impersonated an employee, and it was a phone call taken at, in the organization, that just caused them to be down for weeks on end, because somebody went and, instigated a protocol, and then they've got a problem. So I wonder, is it that? And then I do think that what we don't do, and Michael kind of alluded to it, is the fact that we don't reward the person who comes forward and says, great, it was Billy hit that. The four people that spotted something and didn't click on it, or the people that came and said, I've got a strange email in my mailbox, like that. It's those, if we call that out, then we start to build the culture where people see it's, one, it's okay to announce this, and two, what do we prevent when somebody, and I think that we need to be able to, and it's kind of back to the KPIs again, we need to understand what's at stake when an incident happens, whether it's in my area of the business, whether it's somewhere else. But, that's a lot of money to lose and to have to try and pull back. And I think from a Marks and Spencer's point of view, I think they were only coming back, to where they should have been in the last couple of years. So that's a big hit for them. And the other thing is that part of that was employee data that they also lost. So now you've got people who are sitting there trying to do their day job, and they're wondering, what data has somebody got on me, my location, where I live, all the rest of my bank account details. So I think the more we understand how it might impact us, our job, our organization, I think the more we build a culture of almost like, somebody could not die, but you know what I mean, that you kind of build that, like, if it's like a surgeon going in, if they're not fully with it on the day they go in, mistakes happen, and so I think that's where I'd put it. I think we depend on the technology because we think we have it, but actually we're really missing the real integration of the human into the process.
Okay, Jackie, do you want to come in on that, because that's very much your area, isn't it?
I suppose the whole human in the process thing, I think it is back to a certain amount of your understanding the importance of what you do as an organization, your role in the organization, be it big or small. I think to echo what Michael said early on, understanding what your critical processes are, and then that the people are so critical to those processes, and making them aware of that. One of the things that I suppose can be done, I know larger organizations will do them, but it is, having that incident response plan and exercising it, doing a tabletop or doing a practical thing. I've actually known of a services company that went in to a small organization, took down a server, and it turned out that server did not come back up. Now, this was just in a trial. Those practical things, which are technology, also need to be exercised, that you make sure things will come back up when you know they're going to. If it hasn't been switched off in 10 years, maybe try and make sure you switch it off now. Make sure it reboots, especially if it's critical. There's so much we can do around the technology and the people to be able to make sure that your business will keep going. And all levels need to be educated around that aspect of it, to different levels, obviously.
Very good. Okay, I think we have a mic for the floor. Does anybody want to ask a question or observation, share an experience? Yeah, over here. Do we have a? Oh, yeah. We'll share. Thank you.
All right. So, hey everyone. This is Suraj, and I always find difficulty while giving the awareness training to my staff here. I'm working in a dental company, like giving proper support to them. But when they ask me the questions about, let's say, spam mail, like came into their account, and let's say they accidentally clicked that one. So I gave them training not to click that. Like, that's obvious not to click that. But giving like a more other resources, they feel like a little bit technical because the doctors don't want to learn more technical stuffs in their place. Is that like what kind of options we can explore more in terms of giving them more proper training so that they will be aware of the current technology and the phishing and the other attacks kind of stuff. So that's where I was
Okay,
always.
that is a good point because it's something we touched on earlier. It's the fact that there's always going to be different skill levels and exposures between your sales teams, your technical teams, your customer support people. There's just going to be different levels there. So, say with professionals who are already probably struggling to keep current in their own discipline, how do you then introduce something like this on top of it? So maybe Jackie, do you want to start with that?
Oh God, yeah, that's a difficult question. I clicked on the link. What do I do next? I suppose try not to do anything next. There's probably a few steps that you could probably teach them to do. They're non-technical. Disconnect from your Wi-Fi if you're on a network or things like that. Maybe basic response steps. I know we do simulated attacks for people, and there is one that's quite technical that would be quite difficult for people even technical people to spot that there is now something running in the background of your laptop, and all you've done is clicked on a link. So I kind of be. I don't know, a basics response that most of the links are probably benign as long as they haven't got malware in the background of them. They're really looking for details of you. Just don't give the details. If you spot that, just stop it. Close the browser window. Things like that would be.
Okay, Tony, you mentioned that you have as part of your own service, kind of regular drills as well. So I suppose within that, what are the levels and what are the reactions that might help inform that kind of
like at the end of the day, people are people, right? You're going to have a multitude of different people, and how they handle different situations, they're going to handle them always differently, right? So you have to do multiple things, I suppose. But for me, the most important one is going back to, I think it was mentioned earlier on, but a culture of openness. So if you're not sure, report it. It's as simple as that, basically. And there are no stupid reports, if you like, when it comes to security. If you're just not sure, so they might know what to do, but just make the security team aware that something has happened and let them look into it, I think, is a really important aspect too, as part of the culture, if you like.
Okay. Probably time for another question. Anybody else at the back here? Well,
it's fine. Just
just wait for the mic just so the whole room can hear you. Thank you.
So, hello everyone. My name is Hasvin. So my question is coming back to the training and awareness. So you mentioned that people being aware and getting more training. I just want to get an opinion from the four panelists at the front. Is that what do you think about gamifications in terms of like training with cybersecurity? Now, personally, I have did one of my research in my master's where I built a game kind of related in a storyline base, and it related to where cybersecurity, not really that detailed, but it's just crucial, simple, effective ways of keeping your data safe. And it's also being implemented in a game factor where it's like there are challenges, there are illustration of storyline. So what is your opinion on this? Is like, how would you get people involved into this? And I just want to get your opinion in terms of like gamifications in cybersecurity.
Who'd like to take that first? Because certainly gamification a few years ago seemed to be a very popular means of training, and certainly from my personal impression, seems to have fallen out of favor a little bit in recent times. So, Michael, you're nodding and shaking your head there.
Different folks, different strokes. I'm not a gamer. My kids are. When I get these internal emails that ask me to play a game to learn about cyber defenses, I tend not to go with them. But that doesn't mean it's not appropriate for somebody else. While somebody else would just hate to do a questionnaire, or read down through it, or read down technical, they'd rather be involved. any and all options are important. Because I said earlier, that people still believe that it's the responsibility of the IT and security teams, and it's not. It's responsive of everybody. So yes, the gaming has fallen out of play a little bit, role games, but that's okay. It'll come back. But whatever works, I think should work. You got to think the way the bad guys think. The bad guys will try and try and try and fail and fail and fail. So then you have to be successful once. You have to fail once and they got you. So yeah, if you fail with training, don't be too, go again, but make sure that you do eventually, that you then, when the bad guys do come, that you're successful. But they will look for you not to be successful. So yeah, whatever works. There's a multitude of items, and it's probably to do with the age of the organization, the culture in the organization, the the fun aspect, the work from home, the physical work. I'm sure people like Carmel here would tell you exactly how the profile would different approaches would definitely fit profiles.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you just, in any organization, people learn differently, and some people are very visual, and that's what they'd like. It also sets a scene for people. I think that they can get into or understand a bit more when it's visual than, kind of reading through the document and, kind of reading a lot of text in order to understand a context, in order maybe to pick an answer, so that if you're, in terms of training, because a lot of the time it's partially training, but it's partially answering questions to see if you've actually learned something, if you've taken in the knowledge.
Okay. How are we doing on time? Do we have time for one more question? Okay. We're making our panelists work today. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick point, really. My name's Phil, and I haven't drank in 10 years. So there we go. So no, it was just a general point to the panel, really, and that is, why is it that we still see today IT and security fighting constantly for a budget? Because I ran a NOC once, and I took it over, and it's not easy, but it's interesting. And the first thing I did when I picked the NOC up is I asked, "Where's the investment budget?" And lo and behold, I was told there isn't one. So I thought, well, okay, so we've got a NOC hanging together with sticky back plastic, and everything's going horribly wrong. But the point was, why was there not a budget? And yet you got IT and securities competing with all other different parts of the organisation for budget. If cybersecurity is on the rise, if it's we're still talking about M&S, and we'll be talking about it in 6 months' time, and there'll be use cases on this one, no doubt. Why are we still seeing this competition for budget? Surely it's a no-brainer. How do we answer that no-brainer point to say you've just got to spend the money, and that's where you are? M&S is going to spend, what, 10, 15 million?
Yeah.
Getting over this, and the chairman's best response was 350 million. It's only a small part of our business. We'll get over it, but at least we'll learn from that and spend 10 or 15 fixing it for the future. Such a negative attitude. Why is that?
Interesting. Carmel, yeah, do you want to take that one?
So this is an answer I heard to that very question about a year ago, and it was two things. One was insurance, that every company is paying cybersecurity insurance now. So to a degree, I've made an investment in insurance, therefore I can afford to take a certain hit in my organization. And I think the other one is that people think that it'll never happen to them until it happens to them. Now, the only good thing I think is that we're now getting organizations that are coming forward and saying it's happened to them. Now, maybe a lot of them that are coming forward it's very obvious. If your website is down like M&S for the last couple of weeks, you kind of know something's going on. But I don't know if that's true, but certainly insurance seems to be playing a part, where I would say, and this is from my days in IBM, I think you will find that tech companies, to a great degree, won't get caught, because for them it's a huge reputational issue. You can imagine if IBM got hit with a big, attack in the next week, that's all over the front of every single newspaper worldwide. It impacts their clients. If you can't protect yourself, how can you protect us? So I think you've got sort of the ones that will invest the money because it's core to their business. So I think most techs will do, and probably Cisco as well. But I think we have a certain set of others that are saying, I'm paying my insurance, and yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree on the insurance piece somewhat. And the only reason I say that is I think it's slightly changing. A lot of the insurance companies are now going, if you have to have this, and this in place, otherwise your premium is going to be way up here, basically. So they've cottoned on to that fact that, you know, people are just sort of passing the buck maybe to some degree and passing the risk, but that's changing, I think, as well, and rightly so, you know.
Okay, so even the process of achieving insurance is like an assessment in itself.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Very
Yeah,
good.
absolutely.
Okay.
And there are three things that you got to look at: risk, threat. They're not the same thing. People interlink them. Risk is what will happen if you don't do something. So if I leave a TV outside there and it rains, it's gone. It's a risk. It's going to happen because it's going to rain eventually. Don't know when. Threat is an expression of violence or abuse towards you that may or may not happen. Now, we're living in a threatscape, not a riskscape. That's a problem. But when you have risk and threat, risk is quantifiable. So you know what the exchange rate is going to be in 6 months' time because it's all worked out. That's a risk. Threat is undefinable. How do I get an ROI for threat? There is no ROI. So how do I go to a financial person and say, show me the ROI? And say, I don't know how. And even if I did, it's BS. And also the bad guys are going to come along with AI. They're going to come along with insiders. They're going to come along with weaponized quantum computers. And that's going to blow up the budget again. It's really difficult. You just got to keep at it. There is no, I've never found the solution where there's no such thing as an ROI. And anybody else with an ROI in cyber, there's no such thing because we're in threat, we're not in risk. And then we're going to say, well, just to tell you, next year's going to go up, but I don't know how much because the threat scape's going up as well. But then you have to take a look at, is it Hansberg's motivation and hygiene factors? Hygiene, if you look at the hygiene factor, if you don't keep your kitchen clean in a restaurant, you will give food poisoning to your clients. But if you constantly clean non-stop, there comes a point that all the cleaning, there's a level of cleaning that even if you do any more, you don't make any more protection. So you've got to find that. And that's the problem, but it's called the hygiene factor. And a lot of people think that, we can drop the hygiene factor. There's a certain level of hygiene you have to get to, and anything above it, you don't get any more reward from it. But I never know when that level is going to increase. So it's a tough one.
Okay. Jackie, do you want to come in there?
I suppose it was back to my point that an awful lot of organizations don't realize that the technology is actually key to what they do. Particularly with I've worked in an incubator in MTU, and people think, well, my job is, we say with Marks and Spencer's, is retail. But now they've realized that this retail doesn't really happen without the technology. And now they look at the technology and realize the money they have to put into it to keep it protected. But, whereas on the flip side, I've worked in a company that ran an online betting exchange. So to them, the technology was the most important, not the betting, but the technology, because you're running an purely online business there. So it's that they don't, and the financial people don't equate their technology with the core business. So they limit the amount they spend on it. And for me, that's what happens.
Okay.
Good point.
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting question, and I don't think there's really a good answer, because if there was a good answer, everybody would have all the budget that they needed, right? But I think it's actually worse than actually not getting the budget, because one of the things you need in a proper cyber resiliency strategy is resources in reserve, it's called. So when an attack happens, can I react in my best self to it, basically? And the only way an organization can do that is to have resources in reserve ready to go. And, if you're looking for budget just to implement the systems to keep you safe on a day-to-day basis, try looking for resources that you're going to leave sitting there in a drawer and ready to go. And yeah, good luck with that one, right? So, but it is something that is required to have a proper cyber resiliency strategy.
Okay. All right, I think we're just about up on time there, but just a reminder that the ICT SkillNet stand outside brings together all the threads on this, both in terms of the technical and the people and the process. So IBM and Cisco contribute very heavily to the resources behind that. So if you are looking for any more information around this at all, please do consult with ICT SkillNet, and they can certainly meet your needs. But hopefully that's given you a good idea of cyber resilience as a concept, but also as a practice and as a culture, because I think it's really important to understand that particular aspect of it. So thank you very much to all our panelists, Michael, Carmel, Tony, and Jackie, and thank you very much for attending.